Bien, bonjour. Vous me permettrez d'adresser encore une fois mes premiers mots aux gens des communautés de l'Abitibi-Témiscamingue, du nord du Québec et de la Côte-Nord. Non seulement la situation atteint des proportions alarmantes, mais rien ne suggère un apaisement durable à court terme. Et imaginez si nous, ici, dans le Parlement, on sent la fumée, ce que les gens qui ont peur chaque jour de perdre leur maison, de perdre leur village, doivent vivre ou ressentir. Alors, notre cœur va vers eux sans aucune hésitation. Cependant, il y a aussi une autre chose qui est fort importante qu'il m'apparaissait crucial d'illustrer. Le gouvernement s'est revendiqué, non seulement dans le dossier des ingérences chinoises, mais en général comme étant le gouvernement ami de la diversité, des minorités, des opprimés, des victimes d'affronts aux droits humains et a fait beaucoup de capital politique sur cet enjeu-là. Il est allé jusqu'à dire qu'il se portait à la défense de la communauté chinoise sur le territoire canadien, alors qu'en fait, ce sont les gens qui ont besoin de sa protection et qui ne l'ont pas. Mais il existe des communautés, des peuples, au sens large du terme, parce que chacune de ces communautés sur des territoires qui leur sont propres ou qui leur étaient propres se définira comme bon lui semblera. Il existe des communautés qui subissent quotidiennement l'oppression, la violence, l'intimidation, l'intrusion du régime dictatorial du Parti communiste chinois. Ce même régime que le gouvernement canadien s'obstine à ne pas affronter avec les moyens légitimes à sa disposition. Nous avons, à l'initiative d'Alexis Brunelle-Duceppe, suggéré à des porte-paroles de 5 communautés différentes, dans des statuts et dans des situations différentes, en particulier sur le territoire canadien, de profiter de la tribune du Parlement pour exprimer ce qui est leur réalité. Avec nous aujourd'hui, il y a notre vieil ami, parce que ça devient plus fréquent, M. Mehmet Totsi, directeur du projet de défense des Ouïghours, du Canada-Hong Kong Link, Mme Gloria Fong, qui en est la présidente, du Comité Canada-Tibet, M. Sherap Tershin, qui en est le directeur, de l'Association taïwanaise du Canada, M. Mario Chen, et conseiller politique du premier ministre de la province de Malaita, aux îles Salomon, dont la situation est très, très singulière, M. Celsus Talifilou, qui est avec nous, que j'ai eu la chance de rencontrer la semaine dernière avec l'ancien premier ministre. Et chacun d'entre eux sera invité à vous adresser quelques mots afin de vous dépeindre la situation à leur convenance. Nous sommes là pour leur offrir cette tribune privilégiée vers l'ensemble des citoyens du Québec et du Canada. D'abord, j'inviterai M. Mehmet Totsi.
Good morning, and thank you, the Honourable Leader of Parti Québécois, to provide us this opportunity to make our voice heard loud and clear, this time in the heart of our Parliament. My name is Mehmet Tohti. I'm the Executive Director of Ottawa-based Uyghur Rights Advocacy Project, and I'm speaking on behalf of Uyghur Canadians today about their experience of transnational repression and interference to their daily freedom by the Chinese government across the ocean. The Uyghur Canadians have been double victimized, not only by the Chinese transnational repression, at the same time because of lack of protection in Canada. And as you know, the Canadian victim of Chinese transnational oppression is Hussein Jalil, Canadian citizen, abducted in Uzbekistan in 2006 and still in Chinese jail. And we don't know whether he's alive or dead. And because of lack of protection and concern, we don't know about his whereabouts. And not only Hussein Jalil and all Uyghur Canadians have been experiencing this type of intimidation, harassment, and the direct interference of our daily freedom as a free people in Canada since decades. And we have been updating and briefing to various government officials since early 2000. And the Chinese transnational oppression has been the case or main concern of Uyghur Canadians, because as a citizen of this free country, we are unable to enjoy our freedom as a citizen of this free country, because Chinese government has used our relatives, taking them as a hostage, and putting pressure upon us to live under the shadow of Chinese Communist Party. And today, at this golden opportunity that we have a national conversation about Chinese interference, and we want our parliament to have a full, transparent public inquiry. We have to get the bottom of Chinese interference, and we have to figure out what kind of policy measures that government of Canada has been or is going to undertake, and whether it is working or not, whether it is adequate or not, and we have to figure out and how deep and widespread the Chinese interference in Canada. At the same time, we have to shed a light that Chinese transnational oppression has already reached the Canadian soil. And a number of times when we initiated the major campaign, we were called by Chinese state police directly, by hostage taking of our loved ones back home, to stop our freedom of exercise, freedom of association, and the freedom of the activities here in Canada. It happened lately in January 16th, and it happened in 2006, it happened in 2021, and is still ongoing. Many Uyghur Canadians are experiencing this kind of direct threat from Chinese government. And for that reason, we have to have this public inquiry as soon as possible, and we have to ensure that Canadian citizens, especially Uyghur Canadian citizens, are safe in this free country. Thank you.
Veuillez maintenant entendre Madame Gloria Fong du Canada-Hong Kong Link.
I'm Gloria Fung, the president of Canada-Hong Kong Link. I'm also the coordinator of the Canadian Coalition for a Foreign Influence Registry that consists of 33 multicultural communities, think tanks, and human rights groups. Mr. Johnson's report is a huge disappointment. Canadians need an independent public inquiry to get to the bottom of the foreign interference problem, not more and more hearings. Civil society organizations like ours have testified at numerous parliamentary committees over the past decade. Yet, foreign interference and intimidation has only gotten worse. Mr. Johnson has not told us why. We have no confidence he that he ever can. Of course, commissions of inquiry will look at some evidence behind closed doors, but the conclusions and recommendations are public. This is the only way to restore trust that we have lost in this process. Our Canadian government also needs to take immediate concrete action to stop the serious threat to our democracy Canadians cherish. We need a strong foreign influence registry to be in place before the next election. Time is running out, and we have no time to waste. We need immediate action now.
S'il vous plaît, accueillez du Comité Canada-Tibet, M. Sherap Tershin, qui en est le directeur.
Thank you, Honorable Leader of the Bloc Québécois. And thank you, members of the media, for coming here today. So I'm here speaking on the behalf of Canada-Tibet Committee, Tibetan Advocacy Group, along with some of my friends from Tibetan group here. So the attack on Tibetan language, culture, and identity by the Chinese government is almost at all-time high. You might have heard about the forced separation of over 1 million Tibetan children into colonial boarding school. You might have heard about the forced collection of biometric data and DNA sample. And when we try to raise awareness about such human rights violations happening in Tibet, in Canada, when our leaders, elected Tibetan leaders, try to raise awareness about it in Canada, we face opposition, we face interference from the Chinese government. For example, in April 2022, last year, when Tibetan elected leader, President Sikyong Pempasing, when he came to Ottawa, when he talked about all the human rights violations happening in Tibet, and when he testified before the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Chinese consulate in Ottawa raised objection against it. Similarly, we have a large number of Tibetan Canadians who still have families inside Tibet. When they try to communicate with their family inside Tibet, their family receive threat. And when they try to visit their family, when they try to apply for visa, they receive certain conditions about applying for visa. They are asked whether they have participated in any events that call for objection against the Chinese policy in Tibet. They are called to condemn our spiritual leader, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. They're called to condemn the elected Tibetan leader from the central Tibetan administration. So with all this interference happening at different level, not just at individual level, but also at organizational level. In 2019, we had a fake Tibetan, I stress this word, fake Tibetan organization in Toronto backed by Chinese government that saw participation from and we see this participation from elected Canadian representatives at all levels, not just at the federal level. We saw a representative from provincial level, municipality level, participating in this level that spread misinformation about development happening inside Tibet. They forged a letter, signed a forgery of a signature from Honorable Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. That happened in 2019. So with all this, and as an activist, I find it very difficult with the ongoing environment of Chinese interference and influence in Canada to have a free environment to promote, to talk about human rights violation. I call for an independent public inquiry on this issue. Thank you.
Maintenant, j'aimerais inviter de l'Association taïwanaise du Canada, M. Mario Chen.
Bonjour, Monsieur Blanchet, Monsieur Duceppe. Bonjour à tous les amis. Bonjour, Madame, Monsieur. Mon nom est Mario Chen. Je présente l'Association taïwanaise du Canada. Je dois remercier en premier, merci beaucoup Bloc Québécois qui a nous donné cette opportunité de présenter la liberté, démocratie, économique, santé avancée et surtout Taïwan respecte les droits des humains. Tout ça, je dois remercier aussi le gouvernement au Canada dans cette opportunité aussi de supporter démocratie, freedom, Taïwan, inclus des autres pays. Alors, ici, je dois encore tout remercier encore 1000 fois le plus fort parti Bloc Québécois. Aussi, eux, ils peuvent encore supporter et aussi aider tous les freedom, tous les pays qui est bon pour donner tous les bons droits des humains. Je n'ai pas d'autre chose à dire, c'est juste 1000 fois encore merci beaucoup à vous autres, très gentillesse, Canadiens, Québécoises. Merci beaucoup.
Finalement, et pour une situation qui est très particulière, qu'il vous décrira, le conseiller politique de l'ancien premier ministre de la province de Malaita aux îles Salomon, essentiellement expulsé de force par les interventions chinoises, M. Celsus Tali-Filou.
Thank you, sir. I come from the Solomon Islands. I've been in the country for close to 2 weeks. I and my premier, we are affected in the same ways that we have seen here in Canada as well. It is indeed a surprise for us to be able to learn what is happening here in Canada. That's the same thing that's happening in the Solomons as well. And our message, we were in Washington before coming here. Our message to the bigger democracies is protect democracy, which means protect the institutions of democracy. In countries like Solomon Islands and least developed countries, we are susceptible for the Chinese Communist Party because of money, of course. Therefore, the bigger countries who have more wealthier than other countries need to invest in democracy in these small countries to build a coalition of democracies to fight against the tyrannies like CCP. In the Solomon Islands, it's the first of any place in the democratic world for Chinese involvement in our politics to actually ousted the premier of the province that I come from. I think this was the first one. So in the Pacific, there is possibilities if the bigger democracies like Canada, US, and the United Kingdom have continued ignoring the small states, there is the possibility that the Chinese can build coalitions in these smaller countries and can affect decisions at the United Nations and other international organizations. So the message from us, the small island countries, is we love democracy too. We enjoy the same freedoms. We would like to do that. Although we are small, we feel that we share the same values as you are. So help us so that all of us democratic countries can fight against these tyrannies of the world. Thank you very much.
En conclusion, avant de vous inviter à poser des questions, je vous aiderai pour les noms, parce que ça se pourrait que vous ne les ayez pas tous appris par cœur. D'abord, je vous confirme qu'aucun de ces groupes n'a été contacté par David Johnston. Personne. Une enquête ou un rapport préliminaire sur les ingérences chinoises sur le territoire canadien n'a pas interpellé, parce qu'il y a 4 groupes qui sont présents sur le territoire, pas interpellé personne d'entre eux. Je tends un peu la main au premier ministre en lui disant on peut arrêter ça, là, on peut faire une espèce de trêve et revenir aux autres affaires de l'État. Il suffit bien sûr, devant l'évidence des derniers jours, dont hier, de mettre en place une enquête indépendante dont le commissaire ou la commissaire sera nommé par le Parlement avec les pouvoirs de décider ce qui sera public et ce qui sera privé, parce que vous comprendrez qu'il y a des ressortissants des territoires représentés ici aujourd'hui qui ne peuvent pas se montrer, qui ont peur de l'intimidation, qui ont peur des représailles chinoises. J'invite le premier ministre à faire preuve du sens de l'État qu'on attend de quelqu'un qui occupe sa fonction, de mettre en place une commission d'enquête comme le demande le Parlement, de mettre terme au mandat de M. Johnston, de telle sorte qu'on revienne aux autres enjeux de l'État, incluant d'ailleurs, pour compléter là-dessus, combattre les drames qui se développent présentement sur le territoire québécois. Merci.
Qu'est-ce qui ressort pour vous du témoignage de M. Johnston? Il y a plusieurs, c'était 3 heures, mais ce que vous en retenez, vos conclusions.
Quelle est l'intention réelle de la nomination de David Johnston à la fonction qu'il occupe présentement, puisque, à sa face même, comme le révélait ou le résumait le Globe and Mail, M. Johnston a parlé aux mêmes institutions que celles qui ont parlé à M. O'Toole et arrive avec des conclusions différentes, prétendant que c'est parce qu'il savait ce qu'il savait au moment où il savait. Mais il a admis que son rapport était partiel. Il a, tout en étant un proche de l'appareil libéral, admis ce qui équivaut à avoir mis en péril, je veux penser de façon involontaire, ce qui revient à la sécurité nationale du Canada et du Québec avec un rapport incomplet et même à la limite dangereux puisqu'il minimise le risque et la menace que représentent les ingérences chinoises.
Ça vous dit quoi qu'aucun de ces groupes a été contacté par M. Johnston?
Ça me dit, puis pas plus que le directeur général des élections, le commissaire aux élections, ça me dit que l'opération de M. Johnston a des airs de paravent, de déflecteur, de couverture. Ça a les airs d'une opération qui vise à ce qu'on n'aille pas plus loin. Mais ce sera, tôt ou tard, inévitable qu'on sache ce qui se passe. Et le plus tôt sera le mieux, parce qu'il faudrait, avant les prochaines élections, que la sécurité du processus électoral soit rendue davantage étanche face à l'ingérence chinoise ou n'importe quelle autre ingérence étrangère.
If any of the representatives want to weigh in on this, David Johnston says he wants to hold public hearings with representatives of diaspora communities starting next month. Would any of you be willing to take part in it, or do you not think it's worth your time if there's no public inquiry?
As I said a little earlier, we have been briefed to all level of government officials since decades, since early 2000. So our concerns and our the problems and experience is known by the government officials and the parliamentarians. And if there is a public hearing, it will be the replica of the same information again and again, and we have a much bigger problem. And we have to get the bottom of our problem from the municipal level to provincial level to federal level, from local election to federal election, and how deep the Chinese interference is institutionalized in Canada, in our the decision-making process. And for that reason, this is about our national security issue. And for that reason, and we don't, I don't suggest personally on behalf of our organization to waste the time to have the public discussion again, and we have been having this discussion. And the further delay of this process means that continuously allowing the big elephant in the room to participate in our the democratic decision-making process. That big elephant is China, and we have to get rid of this big elephant in our decision-making process, and we have to figure out how deep, how deep this issue is institutionalized in Canada, and how to tackle, what kind of policy measures we need to have in order to address this the huge problem.
Thank you, Mr. Coach. Anyone else want to talk about whether you'd be willing to participate in public hearings?
I'll just add that we expected consultation before the report came out. So that's what I would say.
As I have mentioned in what I said a while ago, We have testified at numerous parliamentary committees over the last decade. We are not too sure how different the future public hearings will be different from what we have gone through before. And actually, over the past decade, despite all the parliamentary hearings that we have gone through, foreign interference and intimidation has only gone worse. So Canadians, as well as all of us here, representing multicultural communities, we have come together with a unified voice today, that is to urge our government for an independent public inquiry to get to the bottom of the problem of foreign interference. And this is the only way to restore trust we have lost in this process. We need to we need to know how foreign interference took place, who and which organizations have been involved in the operation, its impact and extent of influence, and most importantly, how could we prevent foreign interference from happening in the future? This is important to protect the integrity of our democracy. And this is the only way we can restore public trust in our democracy, not through public hearings, but through independent and transparent public inquiry.
Hausse du taux directeur, et est-ce que, à votre avis, le gouvernement devrait faire quelque chose pour aider les ménages qui vont en arracher un peu plus en raison de cette décision-là?
Je pense que vous cernez parfaitement bien le problème. D'abord, prévenons tout de suite le dérapage. Le gouvernement ne doit pas intervenir dans les décisions, les choix et les analyses de la Banque centrale. La Banque centrale essaie de trouver un espace très étroit entre comment peut-on calmer le développement économique, essentiellement, la croissance économique, pour apaiser les pressions inflationnistes sans se rendre en récession qui serait provoquée par les choix. Donc, l'espace, il est très étroit. Je pense que le calcul qui est fait de façon appropriée. Mais évidemment, la responsabilité de l'État canadien dans ce contexte-là est de se porter à la rescousse des gens qui sont les plus vulnérables. Il y a déjà des initiatives qui ont été prises, il faut le reconnaître, mais clairement, la durée et l'intensité de cette période d'inflation commandent une aide soutenue et probablement supplémentaire à ce que nous connaissons maintenant.
Could I get your thoughts in English on the rising interest rates? You know, the Canadian government keeps blaming the war. The Conservatives say it's because of the inflationary budget. What should Canadians, Quebecers believe about all this?
If I were a real economist and being part of the Conservative Party, I will be very unhappy because they say strange things. The federal government cannot interfere in the decisions of the central bank. However, if I do believe that what they do right now is trying to find the right pace and the right level to cool down economic growth without falling down to recession, I think they're doing the right thing. However, the role of the federal government is to strengthen the support being provided to those who suffer the most of inflation. Some things have been done so far, I acknowledge that. However, the duration and the intensity of this crisis commands some more support. Merci beaucoup.